Letters on the English is a series of essays written by Voltaire based on his experiences living in England between 1726 and 1729. It was published first in English in 1733 and then in French the following year, where it was seen as an attack on the French system of government and was rapidly suppressed. Most modern English language versions are based on a translation of the French text rather than Voltaire's English one. A revised edition appeared in English in 1778 as Lettres philosophiques sur les Anglais. Most modern English editions are based on the one from 1734 and typically use the title Philosophical Letters, a direct translation of that version's title. In some ways, the book can be compared with Democracy in America by Alexis de Tocqueville, in how it flatteringly explains a nation to itself from the perspective of an outsider, as Voltaire's depictions of aspects of English culture, society and government are often given favorable treatment in comparison to their French equivalents. Summary: Lettres Anglaises consists of 24 letters. Letter I on the Quakers. Letter 2 on the Quakers. Letter 3 on the Quakers. Letter IV on the Quakers. Letter V on the Church of England. Letter V on the Presbyterians. Letter 7 on the Socinians or Arians or Anti-Trinitarians. Letter 8 on the Parliament. Letter IX on the government. Letter X on trade. Letter X on inoculation. Letter 12 on the Lord Bacon. Letter 13 on Mr. Locke. Letter 14 on Descartes and Sir Isaac Newton. Letter 15 on attraction. Letter 16 on Sir Isaac Newton's optics. Letter 17 on infinites in geometry and Sir Isaac Newton's chronology. Letter 18 on tragedy. Letter 19 on comedy. Letter XX on such of the nobility as cultivate the belles lettres. Letter 21 on the Earl of Rochester and Mr. Waller. Letter 22 on Mr. Pope and some other famous poets. Letter 23 on the regard that ought to be shown to men of letters. Letter 24 on the Royal Society and other academies. Religion. Voltaire first addresses religion in letters 1 to 7. He specifically talks about Quakers, Anglicans, Presbyterians, and Socinians. In the letters 1 to 4, Voltaire describes the Quakers, their customs, their beliefs, and their history. He appreciates the simplicity of the rituals. In particular, he praises the lack of baptism, the lack of communion, and the lack of priests, but still expresses concern regarding the manipulative nature of organized religion. Letter 5 is devoted to the Anglican religion, which Voltaire compares favorably to Catholicism, but he criticizes the ways in which it has stayed true to the Catholic rituals. In particular, in Letter 6, Voltaire attacks the Presbyterians, whom he sees as intolerant and overly strict. Finally, in the letter 7, he talks about the Socinians, whose belief system is somewhat related to Voltaire's own dice viewpoint. Voltaire argues that while this sect includes some of the day's most important thinkers, this is not enough to persuade the common man that it is logical. According to Voltaire, men prefer to follow the teachings of wretched authors, such as Martin Luther, John Calvin, or Huldrych Zwingli. Politics. In letters 8 and 9, Voltaire discusses the English political system. Letter 8 talks about the British Parliament, which he compares to both Rome and France. In terms of Rome, Voltaire criticizes the fact that Britain has entered wars on account of religion, but he praises Britain for serving liberty rather than tyranny. In terms of France, Voltaire responds to French criticism concerning the regicide of Charles I by highlighting the British judicial process as opposed to the outright Murders of Holy Roman Emperor Henry VII or Henry III of France, or the multiple attempts on the life of Henry IV of France. In Letter 9, Voltaire gives a brief history of the Magna Carta, talks about the equal dispensing of justice, and the levying of taxes, trade and commerce. In Letter 10, Voltaire praises the English trade system, its benefits, and what it brings to the English nation. According to Voltaire, trade greatly contributed to the liberty of the English people, and this liberty in turn contributed to the expansion of commerce. It is trade as well that gave England its naval riches and power. In addition, Voltaire takes the opportunity to satirize the German and French nobles who ignore this type of enterprise. For Voltaire, nobles are less important than the businessman who contributes to the felicity of the world. Medicine. In Letter 11, Voltaire argues in favor for the English practice of inoculation, which was widely mistrusted and condemned in continental Europe. This letter is probably in response to a 1723 smallpox epidemic in Paris that killed 20,000 people. Famous Britons. Letter 12 speaks of Francis Bacon, author of Novum Organum and father of experimental philosophy. Letter 13 is about John Locke and his theories on the immortality of the soul. Letter 14 compares British philosopher Isaac Newton to French philosopher René Descartes. Upon his death in 1727, Newton was compared to Descartes in a eulogy performed by French philosopher Fontenelle. While the British did not appreciate this comparison, Voltaire argues that Descartes, too, was a great philosopher and mathematician. Letter 15 focuses on Newton's work with the laws of attraction. Letter 16 talks about Newton's work with optics. Letter 17 discusses Newton's work with geometry and his theories on the end of the world. Art. In Letter 18, Voltaire talks about British tragedy, specifically in the hands of William Shakespeare. Voltaire presents his readers with the famous "To Be or Not to Be" soliloquy in Hamlet, along with a translation into French rhyming verse. He also cites a passage from John Dryden and gives a translation. In Letter 19, Voltaire addresses British comedy, citing William Wycherley, John Vanbrugh, and William Congreve. Letter 20 speaks briefly of the belles lettres of the nobility, including the Earl of Rochester and Edmund Waller. Letter 21 references the poetry of Jonathan Swift and Alexander Pope. In Letter 23, Voltaire argues that the British honored the men of letters far better than the French in terms of money and veneration. The last letter, Letter 24, discusses the Royal Society of London, which he compares unfavorably to the Académies Françaises. Letter 25. Philosophy. In the Letter 25, which was not included with the original 24, Voltaire criticizes certain ideas of Blaise Pascal by taking citations from his Pensées and giving his own opinion on the same subject. The most important difference between the two philosophers is in their conception of man. Pascal insists on the miserable aspect of man who must fill the emptiness of his life with amusements, while Voltaire accepts the optimistic Enlightenment view.